Good evening and welcome to our Wednesday night Lenten services. We begin by singing Holden Evening Prayer together.
Jesus Christ, you are the light of the world.
The light no darkness can overcome.
Stay with us now, for it is evening,
and the day is almost over.
Let your light scatter the darkness
and shine within your people here.
Joyous light of heavenly dawning, loving glow of God's own face, you who sing creation's story, shine on every land and race. Now as evening falls around us, we shall raise our songs to you, God of daybreak, God of shadows, come and light our hearts anew. In the stars that grace the darkness, in this blazing sun of dawn, in the light of peace and wisdom, we can hear your quiet song. Love that fills the night with wonder, love that warms the weary soul, love that bursts all chains asunder, set us free and make us whole. You who made the heavens splendor, every dancing star of night, make us shine with gentle justice, let us each reflect your light. Mighty God of all creation, gentle Christ who lights our way, loving Spirit of salvation, lead us on to endless day.
May God be with you all.
And also with you.
Let us sing our thanks to God.
It is right to give God thanks and praise.
Blessed are you, Creator of the universe. From old you have led your people by night and day. May the light of your Christ make our darkness bright. For your word and your presence are the light of our pathways, and you are the light and life of all creation.
Let my prayers rise up like incense before you, the lifting up of my hands as an offering to you. Oh God, I call to you, come to me now. Oh, come to my voice when I cry.
May our prayers come before you, O God, as incense, and may your presence surround and fill us, so that in union with all creation, we might sing your praise and your love in our lives. Amen.
But yeah, so I'll officially welcome you, Brenda, and for the people who will be watching this on Wednesday night in a few weeks, not only is Brenda my colleague pastor in the Minneapolis Synod, but Brenda married Derek and I a year ago, January.
It's a pleasure.
But the reason that I thought of you is the work you're doing in your congregation, and then just you, who I know about you. We did SHAPE together, and that's, I think, how we really got to know each other, is that we did the SHAPE program, which Atonement helped to fund a couple years ago, which was awesome. And you have just this personality of peacemaking. And ironically, on the Enneagram, which we talked about that a year ago, you are generically called a peacemaker personality anyway, which fits you so well that you can see multiple points of view, that you strive to create a sense of peace in the world. So tell us, Brenda, what does peace mean to you?
Oh my goodness. I think peace is soul work. I think it's much deeper than a lack of conflict. Peacemaking is about relationship. It's about building trust and honesty with one another. It's about learning to be vulnerable enough to be able to really have a deeper conversation than what the surface offers. And so, yeah, peace is surrounded in relationship. It's surrounded in a willingness to be with one another in a way that can be very uncomfortable, but also can be a growth that creates some pretty amazing results between one another, between communities, in society. Yeah.
I see so often on your social media posting on Facebook that you will bring up an issue, but the way you frame it is you say, what do you all think of this? You know, please, let's be respectful of each other. So I've never seen you put up something where you're just like, you know, and if you have genuine conversations, you engage people in a way that tries to understand them, but it doesn't mean you don't challenge them, but you've always done so respectfully in a way as what I've witnessed, both in person as well as online, which is especially hard to do online.
It is especially hard. And I have put it's been a learning process for me as well. So there have been years, a few years ago, I would have put that blah kind of stuff up, but it didn't get me anywhere. And I want to, be who I'm created to be and be that peacemaker. So by inviting people into respectful conversations, I think we've had some really respectful things, and the folks that participate have, for the most part, been respectful. I've only had to eliminate a couple comments in the last few years that I've invited that. I was recently on a friend's page and we were talking about racism, and one of his friends didn't have a response to what I said, but totally attacked me. And told me I was going to hell and all this kind of stuff. And I was like, wow, that's interesting. I mean, that wasn't my first reaction, but I mean, honestly, right? Yeah. But at some point I'm like, okay, so why is it that you're not in the conversation about racism that is a legitimate concern here, as opposed to just attacking me?
Yeah.
And eventually, and the friend of mine liked the comment, and I was like, what? And so then he and I had a private conversation, and I was like, why are you allowing me to be attacked as a person in the midst of this conversation? And he apologized and removed that part of the conversation. it's just, it doesn't get us anywhere when we're assuming negative about another or judging another. It doesn't get us toward peace. And so I don't want to engage in that way.
Yeah. The next question is, how does peace apply to your line of work, and where do you see or not see peace efforts?
Yeah, I mean, in the same sense that we're called, right? That it's not just a job, it's a calling as pastors. And certainly there are places that I use it at work at Bethel Lutheran, because somebody's not taking care of the kitchen like is expected, or we're not agreeing with how worship is being done. Or right now, we have people wanting to come back to worship in person, and our board of administrators making that difficult decision over and over again on a monthly basis about keeping each other safe. And it's difficult. And it's important to make sure that we're looking at all sides of the issue as much as we can. So we survey people and we ask, and we see how many are vaccinated and all that kind of stuff. And there's certainly people that have been there way longer than me that I might frustrate sometimes because I want to make this change and that's not the way we do things and that kind of stuff. But as long as you enter those kind of things in a way that's respectful to one another and not just a thing or an issue, but a relationship, we typically can find, some collaboration or some cooperation around whatever we're talking about. But yeah, I mean, it's a calling. Being a pastor is a calling. And so my community knows that I will show up at press conferences and at protests when asked, and wear my collar and represent not always Bethel, but God, in a way that says, we need to have a conversation about this. We need to be more respectful of all of our differences, but find ways to find cooperation and commonalities too. So I think the justice issues are very much a part of peacemaking. And although no one can do all of it, when I'm invited into those kind of things, I will be a part of that. And I sometimes seek out things that's close to my heart and close to who we are as Bethel. I mean, we talk about all are welcome without exception, and we really mean it. And so if there are things like immigration and LGBT things and George Floyd protests and that kind of thing, then I will represent Bethel and invite everyone to join me, but I'm not offended if nobody does.
Yeah.
We use our skill sets in ways that are helpful. And in fact, in a Bible study last week, one of my members said, well, I'm not going to show up at a protest like you, Pastor Brenda, but I will do this. I was like, I don't expect people to do what I'm called to do. I expect them to do what they're called to do. And certainly much of that is peacemaking. That's what our gospel asks us to do.
It's a great way to say it, that we're all called to peacemaking, but that can look very different based on so many things, based on what our skill set is, what our comfort level is, what our avenues are, that we all
the
have
talents.
Yeah.
The talents and skills that God has given us, like find a way to use that. Yeah, because I think it's important for us to see that justice issues are completely intertwined with one another. And we were talking about the Bethel taking the intercultural development inventory and how people are struggling to talk about racial issues in ways that are deeper. So I invite people into other cultural issues that they're not so nervous about. Let's talk about ableism then. Let's talk about ageism. Let's talk about GLBT things. Let's talk about one of these cultural differences and cultural areas that you're more comfortable with, because the skills you learn in that particular area can be applied to the ones you're less comfortable with, and makes you feel even more vulnerable. And so sometimes, some people would say, well, you're going through the back door. Well, sometimes that's what people are willing to do. And so,
Mm.
you know, let's allow those folks to be who they are,
Mhm.
where they are, and continue to be in the conversation.
Mhm.
After George Floyd was murdered, Mary and I, my wife and I, did some book clubs with folks actually from all over the United States, and really took on some important books, and you know, have learned a lot about ourselves, about our DNA, about our upbringing, that unbeknownst to us, you know, just contributed to the racism in our society. And so we're trying to be very, very conscious of that, and be more advocates and supporters, and willing to be vulnerable and educated about things that we've assumed all our lives from our white perspective, that is simply not true in our world.
Yeah, and if you could not hurt people, why
Right?
wouldn't you? You know, and that's one of the things I've learned is it those sort of subtle things that you think, and subtle ways you behave, and subtle beliefs you carry with you that add up to be potentially very damaging to lots of different lots of different people.
Mhm. I read a book called Enrique's Journey, which is a journey about a gentleman named Enrique trying to get from Central America to the United States, to see his mom, who immigrated years before when he was just a little guy, and the realization of what our immigrants who are at the border trying to legally come across have to go through, and how indeed sometimes their only option is to try to do it illegally, because they've tried so many times and have been sent back and sent back. I mean, he journeyed from Central America 7 or 8 times prior to actually getting to see his mom in the United States, and the harm that was done to him in the process was just inhumane,
Mm-hmm.
you know. And so it just helps me understand that kind of how much of an idiot I am. And I don't mean that meanly, but I'm just not informed about these kind of things. And I appreciate being informed in a way that can really help me understand better that this world is not what I perceive it to be as a middle class white female.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have a friend who's an immigration lawyer, and immigration in our country is ridiculous. It's ridiculous. It is not a line. It is not easy. That's a whole nother adult forum interview I did last fall with her.
Yeah.
But the more I learn about it, the more when it comes to immigration, most of us should just be quiet.
Yes.
That's how I feel. We don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. Or at least, or, you know, make sure we're educated prior to speaking. Yeah. Sure. In February last year, before everything was shut down, a group from church from Bethel went to the Mexico US border and visited some of the shelters, and met some of the folks that were trying to legally come across, talked to a rancher whose land has been built upon this great big wall. And he's like friends with the Border Patrol and what he's learned from them too. And it was just really eye-opening, and just so inhumane, and so much about setting people up to fail, which is something that as a peacemaker, that's just not in my wheelhouse. Like, our job as children of God is to help people succeed and to set people up for success, especially, well, most especially when it's about their own rights to be here. I mean, all those folks are coming, many of them have legal rights to come to seek asylum. And we treat them all like criminals, and it's not true. It's simply not true. But again, that could be a whole nother discussion, because I learned so much by going down there for 6 days and meeting folks and being in that space.
What do you strive to do in regards to cultivating peace in your work?
Pray about it a lot. Wonder and hang out with God to say, okay, what's my next step? more actively, as a part of a sabbatical process, my congregation's working on the intercultural development inventory. And my colleague, Dr. Jen, and I are both qualified administrators for the IDI. And so we're having lots of folks take it. And once our own folks take it, we'll open it up to the neighborhood so we can build more relationships with our very diverse neighborhood. And we're actively doing that in that order so that our people can be more culturally competent once we ask our diverse neighborhood to join us in this process. So being very cautious and conscious about that.
That is a huge aha moment that I had recently, which was, we can say all are welcome and come on in, and then not know that the minute someone walks through the door, you just said something that alienated them and you had no idea, because your worldview is the norm and they're not the norm.
Right.
And whether it is, I mean, that it's so many things, right? Someone comes in with blue hair, someone comes in a wheelchair, somebody comes in and they're not, they're Black, Indigenous people of color. And if you don't know the internal work you have to do to be aware of those pieces, we are going to do or say stuff that's completely not intending to harm, but harms.
Right.
And I realize what a big deal it is, what work you have to do to get to the point where you truly become welcoming.
Right. Absolutely. That was really, speaking of an aha moment, the second Sunday I was a pastor at Bethel, and we proclaim we're all are welcome without exception. A woman who was deaf came in and asked, if we have an interpreter. No, she can read lips, so she's going to sit up front, but can I have a copy of your sermon so I don't miss anything? Sure. And it just was like, all are welcome without exception at Bethel, except we don't do deaf ministry very well. And so 8 years has challenged me to learn ASL, we partner with Bread of Life Deaf Lutheran Church on a regular basis. We've created Bible studies that are both hearing and deaf friendly. We share worship together. We just finished sharing Epiphany Sundays together, and now we share Lent Wednesdays together. And, because it was okay, Pastor Brenda, you say all are welcome without exception. Here's somebody that isn't.
Yep.
You don't do well here.
Yep.
And so we're slowly erasing that little asterisk on our all are welcome without exception. And the community is invited into. I mean, we've built relationships with the community of both congregations by, going to feed my starving children together, going to eat together, having soup suppers together, having interpreters at each table so that communication can happen, and offering ASL classes, and, to give people the opportunity to work on that particular issue too. So
as we wrap up, I don't know if you wanted to share at all. You can definitely say no, and we don't have to include it, but I just am thinking of 2 examples of your own life where you've intentionally crossed over to speak with somebody or people who believed very differently about something very personal to you. And one was at the very beginning of our Shape retreat, where we were kind of introducing ourselves, and it was clear that one of the other pastors there, and this is a small group, there's only 12 of us in the room, had a very different belief, very different stance. And instead of writing him off or getting in an argument, you sought him out after hours to have a conversation and build a relationship with him.
Yeah, I think, and honestly, I realized one of those aha moments, right? When I was postponed for being ordained because I was honest about Mary in my life. And I came back to Luther Seminary, and people are like, so how did your approval meeting go? And I got to say I was postponed. It occurred to me that part of my ministry now is to help people understand that I too am called by community and God. And I'm in love with a woman who we had a union ceremony in 2006 and just realized next month we're going to be together for 15 years. It's like, holy cow, it's an exciting thing to celebrate, right? But it occurred to me then when I was talking to some of my classmates who were, surprised because I was coming out to them as to why I was being postponed, that this became a part of my ministry too. And so at Shape, and this is something you might not know, not only did that particular pastor already have some different views, and it was like, I want to talk to you because I want to know, from where you come, and let's just understand one another. We don't have to agree, but let's at least understand one another. But also one of the other pastors in there had been actively seeking to not allow GLBT people to be pastors.
That's right.
And I knew he was in the room, and I didn't know whether he had changed his mind yet or not. And so when I learned about the one pastor was like, wait, then I knew right away in this small group, there are at least two folks that aren't, at least from my experience, are not supportive of me being even there in the room.
Yeah.
There's another gentleman pastor who was very active in the opposing organization that didn't want GLBT people to be pastors. And we are at the Bishop's Theological at Cragen's together. And we ended up at a lunch table, and we stayed there and talked. And all of a sudden they were setting dinner tables around us because it was that afternoon off kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And we talked the entire time about what the church is doing about GLBT pastors, and why is it that I can live this way but still be called as a pastor, and just all kinds of questions that we're vulnerable with each other. And to this day, that particular pastor just, gives me the credit for really knocking him upside the head and helping him understand what God was up to. Because God gave me that part of my call, I will do that, as vulnerable and scary as it is sometimes.
That and in that Shape group where you're talking 12 people in the room and 2 people, and we're supposed to be there to be vulnerable and to learn and to open up, and 2 people out of those 12 potentially, didn't think you should be there. That's a huge deal.
It is. And it's not so true anymore, in part because some churches have left the ELCA after the decision in 2009. But during that whole process, I would walk into a room and I actually would know some of the pastors in the room, like, absolutely didn't think I should be in that room.
Yeah.
And sometimes if I felt empowered enough, I would sit at that table so that I could be a part of a conversation, not about the issue at all, about whatever the topic was about for the conference, right? And other times I'd be like, nope, I don't got that today. I'm going to go over here where I know I have friendlies on my table, but it is a constant choice sometimes. But yeah, now I don't know sometimes. And for the most part, I'm willing to be a part of the conversation. I'm willing to build a relationship and be vulnerable, as long as the other person is willing to do that too and not attack.
It is easier to go through life and not question the narrative that we've all been taught, and B, to have a wall around our heart, because opening up to other people's vulnerabilities and pains gets at our own vulnerabilities and pains. But that's kind of what the peacemaking, the minute you have a friend or someone, you've had a good long conversation with somebody who shares something you've never thought of before, it changes things.
Yeah. And the willingness to do that. And I will give credit to my beloved wife for breaking down the the wall that was around my heart.
Mm.
I worked really hard not to fall in love with her because I was going to be a pastor.
Mhm.
And she was very persistent in loving me back and breaking down my wall. And with that, I have been willing to be vulnerable with others too.
Yeah.
And so we're good for each other.
Yes, I think you are. That's awesome.
Yeah, but peacemaking is hard work.
Mhm.
And it really hurts sometimes. But my experience has been that it's worth it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It is my pleasure. Thank you.
The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it.
An angel went from God to a town called Nazareth, to a woman whose name was Mary. The angel said to her, "Rejoice, O highly favored, for God is with you. You shall bear a child, and his name shall be Jesus, the chosen one of God Most High." And Mary said, "I am the servant of my God. I live to do your will. My soul proclaims your greatness, O God, and my spirit rejoices most gracious God.
Great and merciful God, source and ground of all goodness and life, give to your people the peace that passes all understanding and the will to live your gospel of mercy and justice through Jesus Christ our Lord.
Amen.
God, remember us in your love and teach us to pray.
Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as in heaven. Give us today our daily bread. Forgive us our sins as we forgive those who sin against us. Save us from the time of trial and deliver us from evil. For the kingdom, the power, and the glory are yours, now and forever. Amen.
Let us bless our God.
Praise and thanks to you. May God Creator bless us and keep us. May Christ be ever light for our lives. May the Spirit of love be our guide and path for all of our days.
Go in peace.